What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G and the Cricket Dream 5G. Now, as always, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz PLS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 400, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Cricket Dream 5G, we're getting a 6.82-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 263, and an aspect ratio of 20.5:9. So for what they are, both phones do have pretty good displays, but each of them has a couple different advantages. On one hand, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, the image quality is clearly much higher. With the 1080p resolution, the image is a lot sharper, which tends to be a good thing if you're consuming a lot of content. In addition to this, while they do have similar display technology, I would say the colors and brightness in general look a little bit better on the A23 5G, and with the 120Hz refresh rate versus a standard 60Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is going to be a little bit faster and smoother with the A23 5G. So if you're doing something like watching a video or playing a game, or just using the phone in general, you're going to get a smoother, more fluid experience, and it's going to feel a little bit more premium. On the other hand, with the Cricket Dream 5G, as you can clearly see, at 6.82 inches versus 6.6 inches, this display is much larger, and this is going to make everything look a little bit easier to see. And in addition to this, with an aspect ratio of 20.5:9 versus 20:9, the Cricket Dream 5G has a taller and more narrow form factor. So if you're doing something like watching a video in landscape mode, for example, you're going to get a more immersive experience here. And if you're doing something vertical like scrolling through social media or reading an article, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. So again, each phone does have its own display advantages. I personally do think the A23 5G is a little bit better just because the image quality is just so much better than the Cricket Dream 5G. But that being said, if you're doing something like reading, for example, where the actual image quality isn't so important, but you want a larger display where things are a little bit easier to see, then the Cricket Dream 5G might be a better choice for you. Now, both of these phones do have 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so while it's not exactly ideal in this day and age, I feel like in 2022, with stuff like apps, the system, and just files in general getting larger and larger, 128GB is a lot more ideal. But that being said, for the average user, 64GB, while not being the best, is still going to be at least decently acceptable. And again, both phones also do have microSD card expansion, and this is great for offloading stuff like photos and videos. Now for security features, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G has face unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key, so definitely a nice spot for a fingerprint scanner. And with the Cricket Dream 5G, we are getting a fingerprint scanner right here on the back, but this phone doesn't have face unlock. But that being said, starting with the A23 5G, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Cricket Dream 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive. And again, remember, with the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G at least, this phone does have face unlock as well. So if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, both phones have water drop notches for the front facing cameras. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, this camera is 8 megapixels. And with the Cricket Dream 5G, this camera is 13 megapixels. Then on the back, both phones have quad camera setups. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we got a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. And with the Cricket Dream 5G, we got a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, as far as the features go, these camera setups are pretty much the same, and the same goes for video as well. Both phones have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, so nothing really different there. So overall, if you're taking a lot of photos and you want a wider variety of features, you're not going to go wrong with either phone since they both have pretty much everything. But that being said, as far as quality goes, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is quite a bit better. So if you're really taking a lot of photos and you want the best quality between the two, then the A23 5G will be a better choice. But that being said, with the Cricket Dream 5G, the quality isn't bad per se, it's just not quite as good as the A23 5G. So if you're just taking a couple photos here and there, maybe to share on social media for example, the Cricket Dream 5G will still get the job done. Now as far as RAM and processor go, both phones are getting 4GB of RAM. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, we got the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor, and with the Cricket Dream 5G, we're getting the MediaTek Dimensity 700. So in general, as far as as performance goes, these phones are actually pretty similar. Sure, they're not going to be anywhere near as fast as a flagship phone, but for really entry-level phones, they are both pretty impressive. That being said, in my experience, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is a little bit faster, so if you want the better performing device between the two, the A23 5G will be a better choice. And this goes especially for higher performance activities like mobile gaming, for example, because while there is a lot of stuff the Cricket Dream 5G can do, the A23 5G is going to do it better. Now that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and here are the scores right here. So again, as you can see by these results, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G again does have a significant advantage when it comes to performance. So if you do want the faster phone of the two, then this phone is going to be a better choice. But that being said, with the Cricket Dream 5G, although this phone isn't quite as fast, if you're just doing basic activities like web browsing, social media, and stuff like that, then overall, especially considering this is a really entry-level phone, for the average user, the performance on this phone will still be perfectly fine. Now for the batteries, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G has a 5000 mAh battery that supports 25-watt fast charging, and with the Cricket Dream 5G, we're getting a 4750 mAh battery that supports 10-watt fast charging. So in pretty much every way, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G does have an advantage here. Not really a huge one, I would say, but it still is an advantage all the same. With a 5000 mAh battery, that's pretty much the largest battery you can get in a smartphone, at least in the US, so you can expect to get great battery life and longevity here. But that being said, with the Cricket Dream 5G, a 4750 mAh battery really is not much smaller, and in my experience, I've had this phone for quite some time now, and I will say the battery life is definitely good. The other thing here is the fast charging. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, 25-watt fast charging is definitely really good, so as long as you have a 25-watt fast charger, the charging speeds on this phone are going to be significantly better than the Cricket Dream 5G. That being said, another thing to keep in mind here is that with the Cricket Dream 5G, this phone does have wireless charging, which at this point in 2022, for a phone that's not a flagship phone, having wireless charging is definitely more of an uncommon feature. So if you do like wireless charging and you really want to use that, the Cricket Dream 5G does actually support 10-watt wireless charging, whereas the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, while having better fast charging, doesn't support any wireless charging. Now as far as the software goes, this is another area where there's quite a difference. With the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G, this phone does have Android 12, and seeing that it is a Samsung Galaxy E-series phone, you can expect to get at least 5 years of software support. But that being said, with the Cricket Dream 5G, this phone has Android 11, and seeing that it's really just a Cricket phone, I wouldn't expect to get any major updates here. So if you do want the latest version of Android, and software support is important to you, maybe you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer period of time, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G will have an advantage there. In addition to this, both phones also have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using Tap and Pay, you'll be happy to know you can do that with either of these phones. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, I would say the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G is honestly the better device in pretty much every way. First of all, the A23 5G has a much higher quality image, so if you're doing something like watching videos, playing games, that kind of stuff, really anything where the quality of the image matters, the A23 5G will have a huge advantage there. It also has face unlock, which, while being more of a minor feature, is still definitely a nice thing to have. Despite the phones having the exact same camera features, I do think the A23 5G in general does take better photos. This phone is also significantly faster. It has a slightly larger battery that supports much better fast charging. It comes with a newer version of Android, and being a Samsung phone, has much better software support as well. But that being said, despite the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G being a better device in general, the Cricket Dream 5G does still have a couple advantages. First of all, again, the display is much larger, and while I do still think this is outweighed by a better quality image, if you're doing a lot of reading, for example, and you just want things to be larger and easier to see, the Cricket Dream 5G is definitely going to have an advantage there. And in addition to this, again, the Cricket Dream 5G does support wireless charging, which is not a common feature in a phone in this price range. And another thing to keep in mind here is the carrier deals. Right now, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G does have some awesome deals, but that being said, obviously, if you're considering the Cricket Dream 5G, you have to be using Cricket, and right now, if I can remember right, the Cricket Dream 5G is still being offered for free, whereas I don't think the A23 5G is. So honestly, if you can get the Cricket Dream 5G for free, then I feel like in general, unless you really need the extra performance or the better camera and software support, the Cricket Dream 5G might be a better deal. Now that being said, deals and promotions are always changing, so if you do want to see the latest offers from Cricket, I will be linking to that as well as both of these devices in the video description. But this concludes my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G and the Cricket Dream 5G. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram, and as always, I will see you in the next video.